I'm speaking with Chris Lioutas, Co-Chief Executive at Genium Investment Partners. First of all, Chris, thank you very much for participating in the Inside Network's Investment Leaders Forum, Queenstown.
Thanks for having me, James.
Great pleasure. Chris, as investment complexity increases, how should advice firms decide whether to build in-house investment capabilities, selectively outsource, or fully partner with a specialist provider?
There's two main answers to this question, James. And the first one is firms' evolution, so where they are. And the key thing we see when we're out speaking with firms is how ready they are for each of these and more specifically where they've come from. And that historical context is important. So we spend time with them delving into their advice business historically, how they service clients and how they deliver advice. And that can be critical in terms of which of those options they land on. Secondly, it's then about where they're heading in the future, where they'd like to head. And what we need to make sure there is that the investment proposition matches their pace of growth and their journey ahead. And a lot of times firms aren't necessarily ready straight up for some of those options. But in most cases, they need an element of assistance. And that's because they have growing businesses, there's growing advice needs across Australia, and there's less advisors to do that. So definitely as we speak with each of them, there's an evolution of conversation around what they need today versus what they might need in the future. And we help them build into that journey going forward. So there's no one size fits all, there's no right or wrong in this approach. It really is quite specific to a firm, their service proposition, their value proposition, and the clients they service.
From your perspective as an asset consultant and a research house, what are the most common missteps you see advice businesses making when they're designing or evolving their investment proposition?
So the key one is there's probably two main ones I'd call out, and there's a multitude of those. But the first one is whether the firm themselves is ready to embrace outside assistance. And a lot of times when we are tendering or pitching for our services, it ends up being an education session. It ends up being a business consulting session on where a firm is at, what their immediate needs are versus their intermediate and future needs. And so we spend a lot of time delving into that as part of the pitching or the tendering. And that can uncover areas of pain points, bottlenecks, things they need to address first before moving on to bigger projects and the evolution of their investment proposition. The second one is firms feeling rushed, I guess, in terms of the approach they take. And so firms have been in business for a long time. A lot of them intend to be in business for the next 20, 30 years. And so there should be no rush decision making when it comes to this. They should take their time. They should prepare the necessary requirements at an all business level, not just an advisor level, but also back office and front office to ensure that they select the right path going forward. The last one I'd probably touch on would be investment philosophy and the alignment with the option they choose. So a lot of firms, either they know what their investment philosophy is or it's not very well documented. And so we spend time crafting their investment philosophy and making sure that it matches their investment outcomes and their client suitability. And if you can marry those together, then the investment option or capability they select largely chooses itself.
How do you see managed accounts evolving over, say, the next 5 years? And what role should they play in managing efficiency, customization, and client engagement?
Yeah, it's a good question. So like managed accounts have obviously been around a long time and they're continuing to grow and there's lots of upside from here in terms of new firms taking them up and obviously firms using them more so than they have in the past. And so where we see the evolution of SMAs is obviously a greater captive audience, a larger audience if you like, and then firms are delving more deeply in terms of how they think about their SMA solution. So for some firms, it's an all solution. So they've got a single client type or a very homogenous client type and the SMA is their solution. For other firms, the SMA is better utilized as a core offering. So something that clients can sleep at night, not have to worry about, and the advisors can spend more time doing other services with their clients, whether that's wholesale advice, whether it's strategic advice, whether it's a whole of life servicing. So there's a whole range of other options in terms of how they utilize that SMA as a core. And then the furthest evolution from that is breaking the SMA apart, I guess, in terms of maybe along the lines of asset allocation, so asset class lines, and or private markets alternative specific SMAs. And that's where we start to get into the more detailed approaches to SMAs. And the ability or the benefit of that is it gives some firms some degree of autonomous back in terms of how they build portfolios because they can then allocate to single asset classes rather than a multi-asset solution. So you do lose some efficiency when you delve down that path, but it does help a firm in terms of maintaining an element of their value proposition, but it can be more complicated by the fact that single asset class portfolios are not as conducive or connected to a multi-asset approach.
Chris, in Genium's view, what qualities define the investment partner of the future, and how should advice firms assess the suitability of research-led partnerships in what's going to be a more regulated, outcome-driven landscape?
Yeah, so I think there's some core features to the question, James, and I think that the one that we sort of hold ourselves well and high and above is depth and quality of research. So we could service many clients, we could rate many products, but again, it comes back to the quality of that research and the quality of that effort, and that's something that's distilled in what we do, and we think that that should be something that firms, financial planning practices focus on as a key criteria when they are selecting their investment partners. So the depth and quality of the research is critical, not necessarily the timeliness and the speed, though that is also important. The other thing that I think is worth noting there is that in relation to when they are evolving their investment offering and partnering with a firm, it's a true partnership model. And I know many say that, but I think the critical thing is that in terms of an investment capability or an investment consulting service, it can be just that, a service. And so where we like to demarcate ourselves is that, I mean, anybody can provide a service. We want to truly partner with our firms, and we see it as a true partnership model. We want to grow with them. We're a growing business. Our clients are growing businesses. And if we can grow with them along that journey, then we're obviously catering for their needs and evolving their needs as we go along. At the same time, we're learning and evolving our processes and improving on our processes, including resourcing and a range of other things. So as we do that, if we truly partner with them, as opposed to just providing a service, then we find that generally the outcomes are more optimal, both for the client and the investment outcomes.
For advice principals who are looking to position their businesses for sustainable growth, what are the key investment governance considerations they must get right to thrive in the next decade or so?
Yeah, so look, I mean, there's obviously ongoing burden and needs of advice principals and advice leaders in businesses, and so the better run and well-run advice businesses, what you generally find is that the advisors in those businesses wear multiple hats. And so obviously going forward, as the need for advice grows and their businesses grow, they will need to shed some of those hats. And so what we see is when we look at the governance structures of some of those firms, that they're great governance structures, but as those people get time poor or consumed elsewhere, they need assistance in delving into their time or spreading their time. And so obviously in terms of the investment partner should really helping alleviate some of those critical aspects so that the business owner can focus on matters that pertain to the firm. And obviously that sort of relates to governance as well. So the investment partner of choice should really help a firm out with their governance structures. So whether that's investment committees, APL management, licensee requirements, and how that affect their licensee. I know when we are speaking with firms, we spend a bit of time actually accounting for their licensee requirements, whether that's a large licensee or their own license. And so what we want to make sure is that we're not stepping on the toes of a licensee or the AFSL holder, and making sure that we're assisting and enabling them and emboldening them to deliver advice in a compliant fashion and in a fashion that meets the requirements of their governance and requirements. And lastly, on governance, I think in terms of as we partner with firms, it's really that increased rigor, professionalism around what we do and how we do it. And so as we apply that to firms, what you generally find is that less things slip through the cracks. And inevitably, people make mistakes. There'll be things that everybody misses or some people miss. But if you apply more rigor and there's more bodies around it and more eyes on it, you tend to find that the governance structures are so tightly held that the outcomes are positive for both advice firm and client.
Chris Lioutas, co-CEO at Genium Investment Partners. It's a great pleasure speaking with you here in Queenstown.
Thanks, James.